Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to an all-new Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Robert Perea, filling in for Sam Chad. On the program today, I have Fernley City Manager Daphne Hooper and Attorney David Rigdon, who represents the city on water matters, on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
I'm here at the Carson Valley Inn in Minden with Joey Whitaker. One of the things I love about the Carson Valley Inn here in beautiful downtown Minden is CV steak. I have eaten here so many times. Tell folks what they can expect when they come here to eat.
It's a beautiful room, great service. We have certified Angus beef, seafood, lamb, a great range of appetizers, and wonderful desserts. Jean-Michel's done a great job of selecting some beautiful wines for us. The customers love it, and we've got a great selection of cocktails as well. It's not a long way to get away to the Carson Valley Inn.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Safety is the #1 priority for the trucking industry. Over $7 billion a year is spent on technology like this electronic eye that will apply the brakes automatically. But the most important factor for safety is the truck driver. These hardworking men and women who safely move over 70% of our nation's freight and 94% of Nevada's. We thank you because trucks move America forward.
Nevada Newsmakers Studio is located at the headquarters of the Nevada Trucking Association. Motion and purpose are a truck's greatest virtue.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
Hi, back on Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Robert Perea, and with me today I have Fernley City Manager Daphne Hooper and David Rigdon, attorney who represents the city on water matters. So appreciate you guys coming in today.
Thank you.
So speaking of water matters, I know you guys have kind of an issue going on that you're involved in with the Bureau of Reclamation. Can you kind of tell me how that started and what it's about?
Sure, I'll start. So several years ago, the Bureau of Reclamation started doing an environmental impact study on the canal. After the flood in 2008, there was some concern about the safety of the canal for the long term. So they started looking at options and alternatives to address those safety issues. So there were several stakeholders that were involved in these processes, and they came up with some potential fixes to address that issue. And through that process, the record of decision was completed, and they determined that the best solution at this point would be to line the canal in full. So there are some concerns about that for the city of Fernley and the potential impact that it might have on our community. And so the city decided to file a lawsuit, and then I will let Mr. Rigdon explain a little bit more.
Sure. So when the Bureau goes through an environmental impact statement process, the laws and the regulations, the federal laws and regulations that govern that process require them to look at all possible alternatives to fix the problem. And here the problem that we're trying to fix is to shore up the banks of the canal in order to make sure that another flood doesn't happen again. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve. And we had identified through the process for the Bureau numerous ways that they could fix the banks of the canal without putting a liner in the canal. And the reason that that's important is because the canal was constructed as an unlined ditch, and when water flows through it serves two purposes. One, it moves water to the farms and to Lahontan Reservoir, but it also recharges the groundwater aquifer in Fernley. And that recharge is the main component of all the groundwater rights that are issued out there. So there's a lot of groundwater rights that have been issued to both the city of Fernley and to private parties, and they rely on that aquifer, on that recharge from that aquifer. And so we proposed several alternatives to the Bureau that would not require the lining, so we could keep the recharge while fixing the canal. That was the key, doing both, accomplishing both purposes. And the Bureau decided to completely ignore that. And they decided to only look at the one alternative of lining the canal and just completely ignore all the other fixes that we had brought forward. And that's a violation of the federal National Environmental Policy Act, which requires them to look at all alternatives. The other thing that they're required to look at is how do they mitigate any negative effects of their project. And they were required to come up with potential identified mitigation measures so that if they did line the canal, if it was the only alternative or the best alternative, at least they could figure out a way to reduce the impacts to that loss of groundwater recharge to the basin. They didn't do any of that. There's no mitigation identified in the EIS, and so those are the reasons that we filed the lawsuit, is because they failed to comply with the statute that they were required to comply with.
So for somebody who might not be familiar, we should describe what the canal is, which runs from Derby Dam to Lahontan and takes water from the Truckee River into Lahontan and flows through Fernley.
Right, so in the early 1900s, the Newlands Project was established, and that was really to bring water to the rural areas and help with development and help to build communities. And so the Truckee River goes east, and there is a diversion at Derby Dam, and then the canal flows from there through Fernley, through Hazen, and all the way to Lahontan. And consequently, Fernley grew up around that canal.
And it's really important to understand that the whole purpose of reclamation, the whole reason it was formed, and this occurred in 1902 when the federal government passed what's called the Reclamation Act, was to encourage people to settle in these desert areas of the West. So they were going to bring water to these desert areas in order to encourage people to come in and create cities and towns and farms and those types of things there. Fernley didn't even exist as a town until the Reclamation Act was passed and this canal was built. And then Fernley was established. I believe it was 1904 that Fernley was established. So the federal government built this project to encourage people to come in and develop these areas 100 years ago. And now people have, relying on that water, moved in there, created a city of now 20,000 people. And now the federal government wants to just yank the rug out from under them.
So that would be, because you mentioned lining the canal would kind of reduce the recharge of the groundwater then?
Correct. The big problem in Fernley is that natural recharge from rainfall, you know how dry we are as a state, only produces about 600 acre feet of recharge to the aquifer a year. The canal, by running through there in an unlined ditch, has produced between 12 and 18,000 acre feet of water a year to recharge that aquifer. And so you can see that the canal is the primary way that aquifer is recharged.
So is all of the city's municipal water underground water as opposed to water from the river or the canal? Currently,
yes. So right now we serve all of our municipal water hookups through our groundwater wells. We are in the process of putting in a system to use our surface water. In fact, we're in construction right now, so that will come online. But right now, everything is based on the groundwater.
How much water a year do you use?
We use about 4,500 acre feet of water per year currently.
And how would that be affected?
So in the immediate term, the city itself won't see any impact. Further on down the line, it might. However, there are about 400 domestic well users in Fernley. that will be affected if the canal is lined because of the close proximity to the canal and the recharge to those domestic well users. So there is some concern that they'll be impacted.
And we conducted a study. We hired the Desert Research Institute, one of the scientists up there. There's a groundwater model that's been developed for the Fernley area that helps you simulate and predict impacts of certain whatever you want to simulate. And we had those scientists run that model to predict what would happen if the canal was lined to groundwater levels. And what it shows is over about a 40-year period, groundwater levels in the basin will decline by over 90 feet in some areas. And that could have an effect that would result in about 75%, I believe is the number, of the domestic wells in the basin failing. Because they're fairly shallow wells in the domestic wells. The city's wells are deeper, but it will, by drawing the water table down that much, it will affect the city's wells they'll drop below what's called the top of the screen. It's a complicated idea, but yeah, over a 40-year period, a 90-foot decline in water levels is a big deal. And there's all kinds of secondary effects from that as well. So for instance, whenever you have groundwater levels drop, the land tends to settle on top of that. And when that land settles, it can create cracks to foundations of buildings. It can, small little faults can open up, those types of things. And so that's why we try to avoid having groundwater level declines.
Okay, we'll take a short break and be right back.
Before the masks, before the distancing, before the world changed, UMC was ready. Our response to COVID-19 began before the crisis did, with our own team of infectious disease experts who've spent their careers planning for this moment. With a pandemic response plan, we'd practiced again and again, and by blazing new trails in large-scale testing, including every patient we admit. Always ready. UMC.
Can't do it. Stupid, like my mom.
We can't do anything at Mommy's because you won't pay child support.
Dad said you cheated, and he's not even sure he's my dad.
Mommy said you left both of us, so she isn't gonna let me see you. I look just like my father.
I'm divorce attorney Marilyn York, and I may represent men, but hate has no gender, only casualties. Please, stop sacrificing your children in your war against your ex.
The signs and symptoms of cataracts can start out small with subtle changes in your vision. So don't wait. Be proactive and take your vision into your own hands. If you're experiencing the onset of cataracts or just have questions, contact your eye care professional or call Eye Care Associates of Nevada today. Dr. Hiss has years of experience specializing in the surgical correction of eye disorders and has completed over 84,000 vision correcting procedures. At Eye Care Associates of Nevada, we'll change the way you look at the world.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
Welcome back to Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Robert Perea, filling in for Sam Shad, who's on vacation. And with me today is City Manager Daphne Hooper from the City of Fernley and David Rigdon, an attorney who represents the city. And you're talking about the issue of the canal being lined and the effect on the groundwater. What other alternatives would you guys have preferred to see, or did you propose?
Well, there were several that we proposed. One is you can just rebuild the banks. So where the canal comes through Fernley, the water is at a higher level than the land surrounding Fernley. So essentially the walls of the canal are like a dike. Those certain areas of that wall had become weak because the federal government hadn't maintained this canal for many, many years. And that's what created the flood. It breached the dike and it flooded about 600 homes. What we suggested is that you could rebuild just the sides of the canal that are weak, and you could include putting within them either a sheet metal or some type of vinyl structure that would strengthen essentially those dams and make sure that they didn't breach in the future. You don't have to line the whole canal and put a concrete the whole canal. In fact, I mean, one of the ways we've described this is it's like if you had a broken arm and you went to the doctor and you said, hey, I've got a broken arm, can you please fix it? And the doctor said, sure, but in the meantime, we're also going to cut off your leg. That's essentially what the Bureau is doing. Instead of just concentrating on the problem, which is the broken arm, they're trying to do something beyond that, which is essentially a worse fix for the city of for the city of Fernley. The flood affected about 600 homes. Lining the canal will affect all 20,000 residents of the city of Fernley. So that's the issue that we have.
So the city filed a lawsuit. What's the status of that?
So we filed the lawsuit, and the federal government filed what's called a motion to dismiss. They claim that we don't have standing to bring a lawsuit against them. We argued that motion, had a hearing in front of the judge, and the judge ended up dismissing the lawsuit. We have asked the judge to reconsider that, so we haven't even gotten to the merits of the case. They've just said that the city, because the city has they claim that the city has no responsibility to protect the environment around the city, that we can't even bring an environmental lawsuit because we don't have standing to do that. That we're just a private entity out for economic gain. That's what the judge determined, which is completely contrary to the way cities are set up and the powers that cities have in Nevada. She likened us to a private corporation who's just after its own profits. And that's not what the issue is here. The issue is we have 20,000 residents that we have to look out for their interests. We have to look out for the interests of the environment around the city and the whole community. We're not a for-profit corporation. The city doesn't make a profit and distribute it among shareholders. We operate on a non-profit basis like all other government entities in the state of Nevada. And so we've asked the judge to reconsider that. If the judge doesn't reconsider that, then we will be filing an appeal with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco.
What would the grounds for appeal be?
That the judge got it wrong. That we do have standing. We have a case. In fact, it's almost directly on point. Years ago, Churchill County and the city of Fallon sued under the same law for a similar issue, a failure to do a proper environmental impact statement. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in that case said no, they're cities. They're cities and counties. They have standing. They have the ability to allege environmental harm. And in this case, the judge ignored that and relied on another case that said private corporations don't have standing to allege environmental harm.
So you mentioned that the judge didn't weigh the merits of the case in dismissing the complaint. What were those merits that you feel like that she overlooked or didn't consider?
Well, when I say she didn't consider the merits, so when you're in a lawsuit and the initial part of the lawsuit is the defendant is trying to dismiss the case, claiming that we don't have standing, the judge doesn't consider the merits of the case because that's later. That you only get to the merits if you're found to have standing. So that's where we are. We're not even at a point where we've been able to argue to the judge all the laws that the federal government failed to comply with, all those environmental laws. We haven't even been able to argue that to the judge because she's just said, well, you don't even have a right to be here.
Okay.
So.
All right, we'll take another short break, and we'll be right back on Nevada Newsmakers.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Dimitri Prine here for Design Outdoor. Come visit Design Outdoor's store and backyard to see our wide selection of fire pits, barbecues, and pizza ovens, natural stone water features and fountains, and frost-proof pottery. Our store and backyard are located at 11600 South Virginia, just north of DeMonte Ranch Parkway. Visit designoutdoor.com or call us at 851-9499.
One of the most psychologically damaging things parents can do to children in divorce
is disparage one another, which is why I can't believe I even have to make this commercial. Half of your kids' genetics come from this person you're spewing hate about. Your children have the right to love you both, but more than that, they deserve to love themselves.
Marilyn York might be a men's rights divorce attorney, but this is for every selfish parent. Shut up!
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
Welcome back to Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Robert Perea, filling in for Sam Shad on vacation, and I've got Daphne Hooper, the city manager for the city of Fernley, and David Rigdon, an attorney who represents the city, and we're talking about the issue and a lawsuit with the Bureau of Reclamation over the Truckee Canal. Before we went into break, you were saying that the judge dismissed a case. My question is, when I asked about what are the merits of the suit, what are some of the things that you're saying in the suit need to be addressed?
So the biggest things are the fact that the federal government didn't follow their own regulations. Their regulations require them to take what's called a hard look at the environmental impacts of whatever alternatives they're proposing. And they failed to do that here. We asked them for years throughout this process. We would go to these meetings with them that they would hold, and we said, hey, use this groundwater model. Use this groundwater model to determine, to weigh the different alternatives and see what their impacts on the groundwater will be. And they kept putting us off, and finally they came to the end and said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't think you even have a right to the water, so we're not even going to study what the impacts are. Well, that's not what the statute says. The statute says you have to study all impacts. So that's a big one. The fact that they failed to look at different alternatives, that's a big one. And the fact that they determined by themselves that we didn't have a right to that continued recharge of that water. They don't have the authority or the jurisdiction to make that decision. That's a state law matter as to whether we have the right to that recharge or not. But the federal government just decided unilaterally, without consulting anybody, without asking any court, they just said, you don't have a right to that, and so therefore we can ignore all your concerns.
So what happens with the appeal? If the judge grants your appeal, then what would come next?
If the judge reconsiders her decision dismissing the case, then the case would be back on, and then we would begin doing what's called briefing on the merits, and we'd start filing. We'd actually argue these individual merits of the case in front of the judge. If she doesn't reconsider her decision, then like I said, we were going to go appeal that to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We'll do briefing there, we'll have argument in front of them, and then if we win that, they'll send it back to the local judge for the arguments on the merits of the case.
Okay. And then what would happen if all of that fails?
If all of that fails, then we've essentially lost the case, and the federal government can do as they please in that case. I mean, we will try to do what we can to mitigate the impacts ourselves, but we just don't have the funding and the ability to be able to do a lot of that.
What kind of timeline and where are you at with the case right now, as far as when there might be another hearing, or when you would get to argue the appeal, whatever comes next?
Well, we have to wait for the judge to decide our motion for reconsideration. We've asked her to amend her judgment to allow us to bring forward make some amendments to our complaint. That has not been fully briefed. We filed our motion. We're waiting for the federal government to file their brief on that, and then we'll get a chance to file a reply brief. We expect that process to be completed by the end of this month, and then we expect a decision from the judge fairly shortly after that. I don't know that she'll have oral argument again. She'll just consider it on the briefs and make a decision is the most likely alternative.
Okay. And after, if she denies that motion and it goes to appeal, how long does that take? That
can take quite a while. Filing federal appeals with the Ninth Circuit, it's a very busy circuit court of appeals. That could take 6 to 8 months before we're even fully briefed, before we have oral argument.
Is with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, if you file an appeal, are they obligated to hear that, or is it like the Supreme Court where they can choose which cases they hear?
No, they're obligated to hear the appeal.
Okay. Are there other, you talked earlier a little bit about some of the private wells being more affected than even the city's municipal wells. Are there private well owners that are that are involved in the suit or in their own suits?
Yeah, so once we filed our lawsuit, there were two parties who intervened. One party intervened on the side of the federal government, and that was the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. And another party intervened on the side of the city, and that was a group of domestic well owners. So yeah, there's essentially four parties to the case.
Okay, so it sounds like just wait and see mode and see what happens next, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really waiting to see, and I have to write the briefs and file them with the court, but yes,
okay,
it'll take some time.
All right, well, thank you two for joining us today. Daphne Hooper, the city manager of the city of Fernley, David Rigdon, an attorney representing the city, and thanks for watching Nevada Newsmakers.
Brian Culpa Photography was born in the rolling hills of Massachusetts, and now he can help you experience the stunning beauty of Nevada in a whole new way through the power of flight. Flying has always been a passion for Brian, and at Brian Culpa Photography, he can make your imagination soar. Brian has the creative mind and tools to tell your unique story. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
Hey, Dad? Why are you learning? This place is great. Huh? You gotta try this.
Wow, this stuff is great. People are gonna love it.
Yes. Yes, they will.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Pro Group Management specializes in providing industries with the necessary components to satisfy and exceed workers' comp requirements. Every business has unique needs and specific regulations. Pro Group Management stays ahead of the curve, providing up-to-date services to keep your industry in top form. Discover how we simplify your tasks, improve efficiency, and reduce expense to keep you moving in a positive direction. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Thanks for watching Nevada Newsmakers. I'm Robert Perea in for Sam Shad. You can check out Nevada Newsmakers 24 hours a day at nevadanewsmakers.com. We'll see you on the next show.